System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Thursday, December 25th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Amoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Amoja, hello. Happy Thursday. We are Muslims and Jews, so we don't celebrate Krima time. But I guess we can say Merry Krima out there to people who do celebrate.
Excuse those of you that are into that sort of thing, which is the vast majority, probably the people that watch.
Yes, that's true. So like I said, Merry Krima, and let's talk a little bit about the United States, because there's a lot of wars out there that the United States is kind of. You okay over there?
Yeah,
your glasses.
Hey, look, man, those of you that have good vision will never understand the struggle, okay? So when I say I see clearly, I had to work hard to do it.
Yeah, it looked like a struggle there, so I'm glad that you're okay. Glad you're all right, and you can see now. Can you see me? How many fingers am I holding up? How many?
I don't know. Why you booing me?
Anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important, again, because the United States, we've already talked about this last broadcast, posturing as if they were going to invade Venezuela. I mean, that's what they're talking about. The posturing surrounding China and Japan sort of entering the chat and wanting to pipe up about Taiwan. Europe constantly pushing this escalation continuously against Russia. The Middle East, the war with Iran, which is still, at a low temperature right now, but it could pop off at any time. Lots going on. And America talks tough. They talk big. When you go into the Reddit chat room, you're seeing that America can't be beaten. They're too tough. They got too much great weaponry. This, I want to show a video. This of Donnie J. This is last month. Remember the Hegseth meeting with all the generals where he was like, war fighters, and you can't be fat, you fat generals. Why don't you go on a diet? That's my little Pete Hegseth impression. But Donnie J was there too, and he was talking a little bit about the this desire to have a war class or war fighter. Battleships. And battleships, as we know, aren't really used that much. But I'll go ahead and let him say it, and then we can get your response.
To use an old term, I think we should maybe start thinking about battleships, by the way. We have a Secretary of the Navy. He came to me because I had the Iowa out in California, and I look at different ships and the old pictures. I used to watch Victory at Sea. I love these admirals. It's got to be your all-time in black and white. And I look at those ships. They came with the destroyers alongside of them, and man, nothing was going to stop. They were 20 deep, and they were in a straight line, and there was nothing going to stop them. And we actually talk about, those ships. Some people would say, no, that's old technology. I don't know. I don't think it's old technology when you look at those guns. But it's something we're actually considering, the concept of battleship. Nice 6-inch sides, solid steel, not aluminum that melts if it looks at a missile coming in. It starts melting as the missile's about 2 miles away. Now, those ships, they don't make them that way anymore, but you look at it and Secretary likes it, and I'm sort of open to it. And bullets are a lot less expensive than missiles. A lot of reasons. I should take a vote, but I'm afraid to take that vote because I may get voted out on that one. But I tell you, it's something we're seriously considering. There were powers. There were big powers. They were just about as mean and scary as you could be.
Okay, so let's get some thoughts here on what he said. You're the military expert here. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm just a hobbyist, but I do spend a lot of time looking up things like this. As soon as I heard,
You're the expert in the room. How about that?
As soon as I heard about the Trump battleship, my first thought was the Yamato class, right? And for most people that don't know, the Yamato was the pride and joy of the Japanese Imperial fleet in World War II. It was supposed to be unsinkable. It was supposed to be, undefeatable. But it represented such a technological pride to the nation that they didn't even want to take it out to battle. Like, it only really saw like 3 encounters. The first encounter, it was wounded. It had to go back, limp back to port. The second encounter, it destroyed 2 ships. And that's what it was made to do. Fight more than one ship at a time. But at the end of the day, even a very fast ship, which the Yamato wasn't, which by naval standards, this Trump battleship would be, it's still very slow compared to anything else. Ships are slow compared to planes. They're slow compared to cars. They're definitely slow compared to missiles. Lots of things are slow compared to missiles. For example, bullets, which he's talking about. Bullets are very fast, but they're very slow compared to missiles. There are no bullets that fly Mach 10. There are several missiles that fly Mach 10, And it really goes to the boondoggle industry, right? Where they will just sell anything because it really is criminal. It's criminal because so much social services in the United States, we can't put money to that because we have to give the money to the military. And then instead of like really going out there and doing a good job with the money, the military just pirates these things, man. Like, battleships went away for very simple reasons. They're incredibly expensive. They're really relatively slow, and they are no longer relevant in the era of drone warfare. They're just not. In the era of hypersonic missiles, they're just not. I don't care if you build it with steel instead of aluminum. Are you building it out of fucking adamantium? No. Like, if you're building it out of steel, steel has stress points. Steel has maximum loads that it can endure. Steel is heavy. Steel doesn't want to float. Like, all of these kind of things that are inherently structural problems that you just kind of take for granted when it comes to ships, because we don't think about a ship. You just get on a ship and you hope to God that it works, right? But no one's shooting at that ship. Warships are made to be fired at. Battleships are big, slow targets. You cannot defend them, right? And like where naval warfare is going right now is submarines. Like, submarines are where naval warfare is won and lost. And by the way, the first time the Yamato was damaged, it was by an American submarine, by the way. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't able to sink it, but it was able to make it retreat from the theater of battle, because submarines are operationally, they represent stealth. They're under the water. They most of the time you have no idea subs are there, right? They're not sexy, right? I can see why fascists and proto-fascists are not in love with them, because they don't parade strength, the way an aircraft carrier does, the way a battleship is. But big objects are just easy to hit in war. War is fast. War is about stealth. That's what it's about. And, the more this is why, right? Ultimately, the Americans want to rush this war with China because they understand the era of good ideas is gone, and they still have a quantitative advantage, right? Not a qualitative advantage, but a quantitative advantage over pretty much any other military in the world right now. It's like an old Mike Tyson, just desperate to get one more fight, while he's still a champion to pad the record. Like, that's the way you have to think about this. the Americans have tried this several times. Like they tried the Zumwalt destroyer, which, by the way, is what this ship would really be. It's really a missile destroyer as opposed to a battleship. If it has any hope of being a realistic vessel, it needs to be a missile destroyer, right? Something that can fire lots of missiles, all kinds of ranges, potentially can be conventionally or non-conventionally tipped, right? Those are the type of weapon systems that still have value, right? But it's not real. I mean, a battleship is not real. And anyone trying to sell a battleship, you're being lied to. They look big and they look very impressive. But, I mean, there's a reason why we don't do the tanks from World War One either anymore. They would die. They would just lose. And it's going to be incredibly expensive. This is why ultimately with the Zumwalt program, which was supposed to be the next big thing that was going to be coming out of the Navy, they just ended up getting rid of it. It just kept costing more and more. It couldn't do the things that it said it could do. And you could tell this was the kind of thing that the Senate, of course, is going to love because, a little bit is done in Louisiana for those senators, a little bit get done in California, a little bit get done in Portland, and everybody gets part of the gravy train. You know what I'm saying? Especially since it's not illegal to have stocks into these companies. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, something has to be built. Say what you want to say about the F-35, but they did roll it off the line, right? For all of the problems, all of the overruns, all of the misgivings that people had about the technology, at the end of the day, Boeing was able to put something out. The Zumwalt, first they wanted 150 of them, then it was going to be 70, then it was going to be 16, then it was going to be 2, then it got canceled. But all that money is still gone, it still goes into the pockets of the shareholders. But even though the politicians get rich and the MIC people get rich, America does not get strong, right? But that money is spent, and they're at a dire place right now, right? This is a failure of imagination as far as like the military industrial complex went, because to their credit, right, those companies like Boeing and like Raytheon, they wanted to build the best high profit, weapon systems, things like I said, the F-35. Everybody makes a lot of money, on paper. It's an incredibly capable aircraft, right? At the time, it had nothing that could rival it except for maybe other American planes like the F-22, but what that did was it failed to see, right, how it would compete with an adversary that had a significantly lower, right, budget for war, right? This is what instead of building, $80 million drones like the MQ-9 Reaper, right, smaller countries like Iran, countries like even like Russia, they built very inexpensive drones, right? So instead of getting the best, most technologically savvy drone that money could buy, they bought the most capable, inexpensive drones that they could buy. And this is an area that the Americans completely neglected. Like they're playing catch up right now, just like they're playing catch up in missile area. Now, people ask, how is this possible when you look at things like, SpaceX, okay, where they're able to put, more payload into space than any other country, and that's a relatively new thing. Like after the loss of the space shuttle program, the Americans were paying the Russians for years to like take their stuff into space. And that goes back to what I'm saying, right? This is when you're talking about SpaceX and all of that satellite launching rocketry, America's as good as anybody else. In fact, right now, they're the best because it's the most expensive, most powerful type of missile that could be built. But meanwhile, on the actual battlefield, tactical missiles, the Army is struggling to catch up with just even Iranian technology. You have the Dark Eagle system and you have the Typhoon, which are meant to be America's entry into hypersonic weapons. and they're okay, but a lot of these weapons are still in prototype phase. Whereas we already know Iran is fully operational with hypersonics. China's fully operational with hypersonics. Russia's the foregoing, as demonstrated on the battlefield, the world's foremost leader in hypersonic weapons. You know what I'm saying? America is entering into this area because they didn't even see it as something that would be relevant. Because that kind of people that could shoot missiles at the United States never would. And the kind of countries that couldn't shoot missiles at the United States wouldn't even try. So they could just forsake entire areas. And the irony is, for so long, the American military strategy officially was full spectrum dominance, the best of everything at every price point. They wanted to have the best pencil. They wanted to have the best plane. They wanted to have the best train. They wanted to have the best super carrier, right? That's on paper. That was the doctrine. But that's not the reality. Because at the end of the day, these companies still have their own profit margins, and that's what matters. When you're going up against Russian military industrial complex, those are companies that are incredibly nationalistic. They're not worried about making the most profit ever. They're worried about creating weapon systems that will keep Russia safe. And China is much the same way.
And this is where we bring, like you mentioned, Russia, Ukraine to the forefront, because there's already a hot war happening right now in real time. What is happening there? Well, that would be drones. That would be missile and missile defense. That would be artillery. That would be tanks, things of that nature. And we already know the United States, I know the Bradley is is that the
it's
troop
the ABC.
carrier?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was a huge failure, to the point that there was something called Bradley Square in the Donbass because of how many of these troop carriers were just getting torn up. And they were supposed to be some of the best in the world. And
Absolutely.
now you
But you could nullify the whole thing with $1,000 drone.
Yeah. And this is something like you mentioned the MQ-9, I think it is. The one where it's like 250,000 or million or what insane price. I remember
38 million. They're 38 million.
They was knocking those out the sky because they weren't playing games. And it's just to let you know, I mean, if a group like the Yemeni have the ability to take out some of the most sophisticated drones the United States has to offer, is to really let you know what's going to happen if you try to step foot into a place like Ukraine through Europe. I don't think America's going to do that, but Europe certainly might. And the conflicts in possibly Venezuela, again, where you're going to probably be having to utilize some sort of drone warfare. I don't know what Venezuela's drone capabilities are. I don't think it's probably that impactful, but
no one does.
No one knows. Well,
and
no one
you'll
knows
pay to find out.
Yeah, especially as they kind of figure out and get ready and prepare for a possible ground invasion. Also, just to bring this up, the conflict that happened earlier this year between Iran and Israel let you know that the Iron Dome was not ready. And what they have, what Iran has, can get past the Iron Dome. And maybe you can speak a little bit more about the Iron Dome and maybe THAAD and sort of where they are missing in terms of, being able to defend sort of what the United States capability is, like I said, in terms of protecting themselves from, say, a Kinjal or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, a crude metaphor is to think about like wrestling, right? Hulk Hogan never loses because Hulk Hogan isn't scripted to lose, right? Hulk Hogan is never really tested. You have to think about American missile defense in that way, right? Like systems like that are supposed to be the preeminent defenders. Like this is what's supposed to keep us all safe, but who's testing it, right? Only the military test it, And so like, again, right, even under the best circumstances, let's give you what those tests look like. Everybody knows the day the test is going to happen, right? You know where the test is, where the missile is supposed to be fired from, right? You know where it's supposed to be fired to, right? You're able to put your defenders in there, right? And then you detect the missile and you fire it. That's not what war is like. So like whatever kind of results you're getting with intercepts from those kind of tests, That's nothing like what real war is like, where the enemy doesn't announce when they're going to fire. They don't tell you how many they're going to fire. You don't know where they're going to fire from, right? That's what happened in the so-called 12-day war, right? Also, having systems that didn't really have layered defense in the way that you need, right? Because when you think about aerial intrusions, they're all coming at several different capacities for speed and also danger, right? What a small FPV drone can do is very dangerous to a tank, but it's not necessarily very dangerous to like a building, right? Or like a bunker or a right? So like, but those things are still aerial objects that are gonna get picked up on your radar. Okay, they don't travel very fast. They don't, as a rule, go super far, right? And they don't have that much of an impact, but it's enough of an impact that you still have to account for it. Okay, so your air defense has to handle that. It also has to be able to handle things that are like unguided, random rockets, right? This is what you would see reportedly being fired from Gaza, right? Before 2000, before the October 7th incident, right? These are right? So, but those are going to come much faster than a drone. Now then imagine, right? Subsonic missiles. Those are the next kind of things that might come in. Okay. So like a cruise missile, things like that, right? Those are not going to be traveling faster than the speed of sound, but they're still traveling normally faster than a plane, right? So like now you have to be able to pick up things that are coming in at, 500 miles an hour to maybe 1,000 miles an hour accurately, right? That's flying low and under a radar. And then you have the middle ground of the hypersonics, which can come at any direction. They don't even have traditional flight patterns. They, whatever, they have a terminal phase. They're very hard to, pick a trajectory and fire. That's the way intercepts normally work. It's trigonometry, right? Like you see the arc of a missile, the computers calculate what are the possible intercept rates and they fire in those zones, right? When you have a vehicle that doesn't have like a traditional flight path that goes all kinds of different ways, it makes it very difficult for an interception path to be picked. And worse, hypersonic missiles are quite a deal faster than most air defense missiles. That represents the last line of defense. This is for the missiles that are supposed to be ICBMs, the biggest, scariest, fastest things, almost always unconventionally tipped, aka nuclear. And what we saw was in its operation, although THAAD had a great deal of success, more than say things like Patriot or Dave Sling or any of those systems, even it had holes. And so like this is incredibly dangerous because this system becomes the background, right? The bedrock for American missile defense. So what happens when it's someone not like the Iranians that have a limitation as to how far they can escalate with domination, with violence and intent, right? There's only so far you can go because to the best of our knowledge, they don't have nuclear weapons, right? But countries like Russia do. Countries like China do, right? And you should assume China, who graduates more STEM graduates than anyone else in the world. India's second, by the way. America's like fourth. Iran, ironically, is still in the top 10, right? But when we're talking about American STEM graduates, we're talking about like 50,000, something like that. On a really good year, 100,000. China graduates 1 million STEM graduates a year. So that again goes to the whole mythology of China stealing American tech, right? Yeah, why do they continue to build these things before we do? And that's the real problem. No one knows what their true military capability is until war happens. And this is why more and more you're seeing the United States, with their love of proxies, continue to spend their proxies. You have a bolder Taiwan than ever as far as the proclamations that are coming out of there, right? And all of the things that we've talked about as far as Takaichi and Japan. America is willing to spend Taiwan and Japan just to find out what China's military capability is before they put themselves on the board. And as a strategist, that is not bad strategy. Why would you put, right? Again, this is the same thing they did with the Ukrainians. We'll give you our weapons. Let's find out what the Russian capacity for war is without having to endanger actual Americans. It's smart, but sooner or later you run out of proxies. And sooner or later, a country is going to stop playing the proxy game. They're going to say, I know who put the battery in your back. And I think more than any other thing, this is what China's preparing for. They're utilizing everything short of physical combat to proactively warn the Americans, like, let's just do multipolarism. Let's not go all in, chips for both of us. We don't need to do that. But America more and more is demonstrating we're not for a multipolar world. That we want to control the world, or we'll kick the whole house of cards over. That's dangerous, but that's where we are.
Yeah, it's not just something that they're talking about. This is something that's already being constructed, as you can see here. Donald Trump with his little dance, his little stupid hand dance. People love that dance. But I guess my question, or I guess my point is, as you see that this is actually happening, it's not just AI images in a boardroom anymore, or a unveiling party. It's something real. It's something that's happening. And as you know, maybe our listeners know, the Golden Dome, also this ridiculous idea of being able to keep these missiles out, which has no shot of working at all, goes to sort of, like you were mentioning, the grift and the disconnect between real national security and making money Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 for your shareholders, which is where American end-stage capitalism remains or is and continues to or at late stage going to end stage, however you want to cook it up. Corruption rampant. This is why they love Ukraine so much, because the corruption there is just off the charts. You have generals riding around in Rolls Royces, and pulling up in the Phantom. Maybe the lieutenants got the ghost. Let's not go too crazy here. The lieutenants get the ghosts.
Gotta
the
have
generals
limits.
get the Phantoms. Yeah, because we're not just running any old kind of thing. But one more thing, because this was, I think, the first year we had the $1 trillion budget, right? And you look at $1 trillion military budget and you say to yourself, well, we've got to be making all the best and wonderful things to protect the country or whatever it may be. But, that's not happening, because what we need is missile defense, drone capabilities, and to, not we. It's not me. I mean, to say that the United States, I think you get what I'm saying. A nation state of the one that I live in. Okay. Now, the problem, and another thing, I know you already mentioned this, but I just want to hammer this point home. 800,000 homeless people, no SNAP benefits for you. What, you buying lobster with your SNAP benefits? Well, I know you're not, but you're probably buying steaks, aren't you? And this is, not to mention the healthcare system, the effects of long COVID that people are still facing. AI psychosis now right here, messing everybody up. And maybe we'll talk about AI soon as well. But it does look like the United States, in terms of its domestic issues, are in need of some help. But it does look like it continues to go to this military industrial complex with the Northrop Grummings and the Boeings and so on and so forth of the world that just continue with the grift. No money for you. No relief on your student loans. Get that out of here, man.
And that's a big part of the issue, right? When I talk about STEM, the deficiency that the Americans face. It's like the Skeksis are fighting the Skeksis, but they need to have a unified plan as opposed to a unified goal. The goal is domination, but they don't have a plan on how to get there. The fact of the matter is, right now, the biggest hurdle you have is education. But why would anyone be incentivized to go to college right now? When you come out, there are no jobs waiting for you, but there is debt, right? Far more people would be going to college if the cost for going to college was not so life altering, so life affecting. And that is because, once again, the financialized aspects of the United States, those barons, the banker barons, they want that forever. They want you to have that debt that you can never pay off, because people that owe money shut the fuck up. You toe the line. You can't get fired because you got to keep your credit rating. You know what I'm saying? But the fact of the matter is, America is not going to be able to push 300,000 people through STEM. They're not going to be able to push 500,000 people through STEM. One, we don't have the demographic even capability. It's just not that many people in America. But two, no one can afford this. And for you to come up with the technologies of tomorrow, the laser beams and the rail guns and all of that fantastical bullshit that you want on battleships, you have to invent that technology. America is not even first in railgun technology. They're not even second. Like, Japan is far ahead of the United States in this technology, and China is demonstratedly further than the Americans in railgun. So you're more likely to see a railgun on a damn Chinese ship than you are an American ship. Never say nothing about, like, where even can these things be built? When I lived in Louisiana, I remember we'd go out and we'd see all of the boat yards, just empty with big hulking ships just rotting, because nobody builds ships anymore in America. Like, that whole industry is gone, right? And those weren't even military vessels. Those were just big old oil tankers, We don't have the skills to build these things anymore. And it would take 5 to 20 years of being absolutely no bullshit, balls to the wall, no playing, no Republican game, Democrat game. Like, we have to agree to ourselves. This is something went right. It would take that. It would take a population that wants to do these kind of things and has the capability of doing them, and it would take the materials to do them. There's no guarantee that the Americans have any of these things. It's just a boondoggle. It's something that'll cost a lot of money, and ultimately the hope is it'll never, it's the Wiz, man. It's the wizard. It's the guy behind the curtain, and you never pull it up and find it's a feeble old man. Because a battleship with railguns, I mean, fuck, man. We may as well be in Star Wars. That's how unrealistic it is. I mean, what are we going to have it fight? Are we going to have it fight the hovercrafts and Marvel's Infinity War, the hover carriers?
So is the Golden Dome, man.
Exactly.
The Golden Dome. I mean, keep it real. You can't even keep it realistic.
It's like that part in Lord of the Rings is like, but my lord, there is no such force. And I grew up a Gen X kid. There's nobody that deified the capacity for the American Army like we did. Our generation, we were the ones that first saw, Desert Storm with 700,000 strong army take Iraq. Even Gulf Storm, the Gulf War II, the second Desert Storm, it was 300,000 people. That's why, Venezuela watches 30,000 soldiers off their coast. They're like, what the fuck are they gonna do? 30,000. It's not a serious number, right? And we're not serious. We have serious goals, right? As far as what we'd like to accomplish with military power, but we don't have serious plans because we don't have serious politicians. This dude is looking at an AI projection, AI rendering, and thinking that we could build this thing.
Can't be done. Not possible.
Now with the technology that exists.
Yeah, in America, look, man, whatever a war looks like, economically, they can't win an economic war. I mean, it's a lot of things that the United States needs to really just take a step back, and maybe peace is the answer. I don't know. I'm just suggesting it. Maybe peace with Russia. No more. No need for NATO anymore. No need to push up on South Korea and Japan and the Philippines so we can continue this war. And
peace
China,
is so much cheaper, and it's better for everyone.
They just won't do it. Yeah. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Send us a comment for the algorithms. Fables, Foibles, Other American Sins, available in the description, innercityleft.com. You can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/innercityleft. Shout out to our community there. Tanky, anything you forgot? Anything I missed? Final thoughts?
You know, they have brought more forces into the Caribbean, but again, until the diplomats start getting their families out of Venezuela, it's just gonna be covert stuff. But it's still dangerous.
Yeah. Well, follow us here, and we'll be talking much more about all those developments as they come along. For Amoja Lil Tanky Summer, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.